about Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix was born on November 27, 1942, in Seattle. His parents were Al and Lucille. They struggled with money and fought often. Lucille was only 17 when Jimi was born. Al was in the military in Alabama. He wasn't allowed to come home and was locked up for over a month when he asked for leave. Jimi's early life was full of chaos. Both parents drank heavily. Their home was unstable. 4 of his siblings were taken by the state and placed in foster care. For a short time, Jimi was sent to live with a family friend in California. In 1945, after Al returned from the military, he took Jimi back to Seattle. In 1951, Al and Lucille divorced. Al got custody of Jimi and his younger brother, Leon. When Lucille died in 1958 from liver disease, Jimi was 15. Al didn't let the boys attend the funeral. Instead, he gave them whiskey and said, "This is how men deal with loss." Around that time, Jimi found comfort in music. He had always been drawn to it. At school, he used to carry a broom around and pretend it was a guitar. A social worker noticed and asked if the school could buy him one, but nothing came of it. In 1957, when Jimi was 15, he found a broken ukulele with one string while helping his dad clean out a house. The woman who lived there said he could keep it. Jimi taught himself how to play by listening to Elvis Presley songs. After his mother died, Al finally bought him a real guitar. It became his escape. He listened to blues and early rock, learning on his own. He dropped out of Garfield High School in 1959 at age 17. Music was all he cared about. He played with local bands like the Rockin' Kings and the Velvetones. He had no steady job and often struggled for money. At times, he slept in abandoned cars, but he kept playing. He watched other musicians closely. One of them, Butch Snipes, played the guitar with his teeth. Jimi copied the move and made it part of his act. In 1961, when Jimi was 19, he got arrested for riding in a stolen car. He spent a week in jail. He was given a choice: go to prison or join the Army. He chose the Army and became a part of the 101st Airborne Division. Hendrix was drawn to the Screaming Eagles because of their reputation. This was the same division that fought in World War II during the D-Day landings. He started basic training at Fort Ord in California. By August 1961, he completed training and became a private. He was then sent to Fort Campbell in Kentucky. Army life was hard for Hendrix. He didn't like the structure or the rules. He wrote letters to his father where he talked about how much he disliked military life. But there was one thing that kept him going: his red Danelectro guitar, which he named Betty Jean. He played it whenever he could. At Fort Campbell, Hendrix met another soldier named Billy Cox. Cox played bass. They connected through music right away and became close friends. Together, they formed a band called the King Casuals. They started performing around the base and sometimes in nearby towns. Even while in uniform, Hendrix was building his future. In 1962, his time in the Army ended after just 13 months. The official reason was an ankle injury during his 26th parachute jump. The Army said he could no longer meet the physical demands, but other records suggest there were problems with his performance. He skipped bed checks, slept during shifts, failed at shooting drills, and didn't do well in physical training. Some reports even said he showed homosexual tendencies, which, at the time, could lead to discharge. Despite all this, Hendrix received an honorable discharge. After leaving the Army, Hendrix and Billy Cox moved to Clarksville, Tennessee. They wanted to keep making music. They kept the name King Casuals and started playing in small clubs. This was when Hendrix began developing his unique style. He played a right-handed guitar upside down since he was left-handed. He also started using tricks like playing behind his head and with his teeth. The pressure to entertain was intense. Hendrix once said, "Down there you have to play with your teeth or else you get shot." It was a way of saying the audience expected more than just skill. They wanted a show. If you didn't stand out, you didn't get asked back. Some band leaders didn't like his flashy style and thought he was trying to steal the spotlight, but Hendrix kept pushing his act further. From 1962 to 1965, he played as a backup guitarist on the Chitlin Circuit. This was a group of venues across the South, Midwest, and East Coast where black musicians could perform during segregation. The conditions were rough. The pay was often small or non-existent. Bobby Rush, who also played the circuit, said they sometimes got paid in food. In January 1964, Jimi Hendrix felt stuck. He had spent years playing behind other artists, following their rules, and living under their spotlight. Now he wanted more control over his music and career, so he made a decision. He left the backup gigs and moved into the Hotel Teresa in Harlem. That's where he met Lithophane Prigon. People called her Faye. She was part of the Harlem music scene and became his girlfriend. girlfriend. More than that, she gave him a place to stay, supported him, and pushed him to keep going. Around that time, he also met Arthur and Albert Allen. They were twin brothers with deep roots in Harlem's clubs. Hendrix started performing around the city, playing in small venues, sitting in with different bands, and trying to get noticed. In February 1964, he entered the amateur night contest at the Apollo Theater. He won first place. That gave him a boost. It proved he could hold a crowd on his own. Not long after that win, a contact from the Joe Tex band helped him get an audition with Ronnie Isley. Hendrix impressed him and got offered a job as the guitarist for the Isley Brothers backing band. He accepted right away. It was a real step forward. In March 1964, Hendrix recorded his first studio track. It was a two-part single called Testify with the Isley Brothers. The song was released in June, but it didn't chart. Still, it was a start. In May, he played guitar on Mercy Mercy by Don Covey. That track came out in August and reached number 35 on the Billboard chart. Hendrix toured with the Isleys for most of 1964, but by October, he had grown tired of the same set every night. He wanted something new, so he left the band. A short time later, he joined Little Richard's touring group, the Upsetters. In February 1965, they traveled to Los Angeles. There, Hendrix recorded a single with Little Richard called I Don't Know What You Got, But It's Got Me. The song was written by Don Covey and released through VJ Records. It only reached number 92 on the charts and stayed there for 1 week. Little Richard's fame was fading by that point. While staying at the Wilcox Hotel in Hollywood, Hendrix met a singer named Rosa Lee Brooks. She invited him to play guitar on her single. The A-side was My Diary, and the B-side was UT. Both songs were written by Arthur Lee. Hendrix played guitar on both tracks, and even met Lee during the session. They became friends, and Hendrix later became a big supporter of Lee's band, Love. In July 1965, Hendrix appeared on television for the first time. It was on Night Train, a local show on Nashville's WLAC-TV. He performed as part of Little Richard's band, backing up vocalists Buddy and Stacy on the song Shotgun. That clip is now the earliest known video of Hendrix performing live. But things weren't smooth with Little Richard. The two often argued. Hendrix liked to show off on stage. He wore flashy clothes and had a style that clashed with Richard's image. In late July, Richard's brother Robert fired Hendrix from the band. On July 27, 1965, Hendrix signed his first recording contract. It was with Juggy Murray at Sue Records and a management company called Copa. After that, he briefly rejoined the Isley Brothers and recorded another single. It was Move Over and Let Me Dance with Have You Ever Been Disappointed as the B-side. Later that year, Hendrix met Curtis Knight at a hotel. Knight led an R&B band called The Squire. Hendrix joined them and stayed for 8 months. In October 1965, Hendrix and Knight recorded How Would You Feel with Welcome Home on the B-side, but Hendrix had already signed a 2-year deal with Sue Records. On October 15, 1965, he also signed another contract. This time, it was a 3-year deal with a man named Ed Chalpin. The partnership didn't last, but the contract did. It caused problems for Hendrix later in his career. While playing with Curtis Knight and the Squires, Hendrix also worked with other artists. He toured with Joey D and the Starlighters. He recorded with King Curtis. He also played on a single for Ray Sharp called Help Me. That track was split into 2 parts. Hendrix got his first songwriting credits in 1966. He wrote 2 instrumentals, Hornet's Nest and Knock Yourself Out. Both were released as a single under Curtis Knight and the Squires. By 1966, Hendrix was ready to break away from the R&B scene. He moved to Greenwich Village in New York. The area had a strong creative energy. It was filled with artists, musicians, and new ideas. Hendrix found work playing at Cafe Wha on McDougal Street. He started a new band called Jimmy James and the Blue Flames. One of the members was Randy California, who later formed the band Spirit. The Blue Flames played all over New York. Hendrix used those gigs to shape his sound. He started experimenting with new styles and stage moves. In September 1966, the band played some of their last shows together at Cafe Ogogo in Manhattan. That time, they performed as the backup group for a singer named John Hammond. On September 24, 1966, Jimi Hendrix landed at London Airport with almost nothing. He had a change of clothes, some hair curlers, a guitar, and 40 borrowed dollars in his pocket. The airport had just been renamed Heathrow. Hendrix didn't know it yet, but this trip would change his life. Earlier that summer, he had been playing small gigs in New York City under the name Jimmy James. One night at Cafe Wha in Greenwich Village, former Animals bassist Chad Chaz Chandler saw him perform. Chandler was looking for new talent. When he saw Hendrix play, he knew he had found something special. Just 12 days after Jimi arrived in London, the Jimi Hendrix Experience came together. It happened on October 6, 1966. Chandler quickly brought in musicians. He met Noel Redding at an audition for The New Animals. Jimi liked how Redding understood blues progression. He also liked his unusual hairstyle. For the drummer, Chandler called Mitch Mitchell. Mitchell had just been fired from Georgie fame and the Blue Flames. He and Jimi connected over their shared love for rhythm and blues. Chandler also helped create Jimi's image. He suggested changing the spelling from Jimmy to Jimi. It made the name look different and gave it a more unique style. The band started playing right away. Within a week, they joined French singer Johnny Hallyday on a 4-show tour in France. On October 23rd, they recorded their debut single, Hey Joe, at Delane Lee Studios in London. Less than a month had passed since Jimi arrived in England, but recording wasn't easy. Their loud Marshall amps caused problems with the studio equipment. Jimi also felt nervous about his singing. The B-side of the single, Stone Free, was recorded on November 2nd. It was the first original song Jimi wrote with the band. Chandler had encouraged him to write it so Jimi could earn money through publishing rights. Even with their talent, getting a record deal was tough. Eventually, The Who's managers Kit Lambert and Chris Stamp signed them to their new label, Track Records. Because Track was still new, the first single was released through Polydor on December 16, 1966. Hey Joe entered the UK charts at number 41. It later reached number 6 and stayed on the chart for 10 weeks. Jimi also appeared on TV shows like Ready, Steady, Go and Top of the Pops, which helped the song get more attention. Just a few months earlier, he had been a backup guitarist in small New York clubs. Now, he was becoming a star. Chaz Chandler had a plan. He wanted to make sure the right people saw Hendrix perform. On October 1st, 1966, just a week after Jimi arrived, Chandler took him to London Polytechnic, where Cream was playing. Jimi asked if he could join them on stage. They agreed. He played Killing Floor by Howlin' Wolf and stunned the crowd. Eric Clapton was backstage after the song, shocked and speechless. While lighting a cigarette, he told Chandler, "You never told me he was that fucking good." By mid-November, Jimi was playing shows at the Bag O'Nails Club. The crowd was filled with stars like Paul McCartney, John Lennon, Mick Jagger, Jeff Beck, Pete Townshend, and Brian Jones. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Kevin Ayers remembered the scene and said they were all swearing in shock. Around that time, Jimi moved into 34 Montague Square with his girlfriend Kathy Etchingham. The flat was owned by Ringo Starr. Chandler and his girlfriend also lived there. Jimi performed at elite clubs like the Scotch of St. James near Buckingham Palace. The Beatles and the Rolling Stones had their own tables there. Chandler had done what he set out to do. He made Hendrix the most talked about musician in London in just 2 months. Still, not everything went smoothly. Jimi was passionate and had strong opinions about how his music should sound. During the first studio sessions for Hey Joe, Chandler asked him to turn down his amps. That led to a major outburst. Jimi shouted that he couldn't work in a place like that. He said he might as well go back to New York. Chandler stayed calm. He had just come from the visa office and had Jimi's passport and return flight ticket in his pocket. He placed them on the mixing desk and said, "Go on then, fuck off back to America." In another version, he simply said, "Piss off." Jimi looked at him, laughed, and said, "All right, you called my bluff." That moment set the tone for how they would work together. Jimi demanded freedom. Chandler gave him space, but also made sure things stayed on track. The real turning point came on June 18, 1967, at the Monterey Pop Festival. It was a warm night. Hendrix had become a sensation in London, but in the United States, most people still didn't know his name. He knew this performance could change everything. The Who had just finished their set by smashing their instruments. Jimi had to do something even bigger. Before he went on, he asked a stagehand for lighter fluid. He hid it behind his amplifier. Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones introduced him to the crowd. Jimi ended his set with Wild Thing. He dropped to his knees, did a flip with his guitar, and said into the microphone, "I'm gonna sacrifice something I really love, man." Then he poured the lighter fluid over his Stratocaster and set it on fire. He smashed it 7 times and threw the burning pieces into the crowd. Photographer Ed Carafe captured the moment. The image became one of the most famous photos in rock history. That night turned Hendrix into a star in his own country. Music writer Robert Christgau later said that this performance introduced a guitar style so powerful and new that no one has matched it since. Jimi's first album also made waves. Are You Experienced was was released in the UK on May 12, 1967. It stayed on the British charts for 33 weeks and reached number 2, just behind Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. The UK version didn't include Purple Haze, Hey Joe, or The Wind Cries Mary. Instead, it featured songs like Red House, which showed Hendrix's blues roots. Jimi didn't like the UK album cover. After his success at Monterey, Reprise Records released a new version of the album in the US on August 23, 1967. The American release had different songs and new psychedelic cover art by Carl Ferris. This version included the hit singles but removed Red House, Remember, and Can You See Me. Purple Haze only reached number 65 on the US singles chart, but the album itself became a massive hit on underground FM radio. It climbed to number 5 on the Billboard album chart and stayed there for 106 weeks. 76 of those weeks were in the top 40. It also reached number 10 on the Billboard R&B chart and stayed there for 70 weeks. Reprise spent $20,000 to promote the album, which was a huge amount at the time. In 1968, Jimi Hendrix was at the height of his fame. On October 16th, he released Electric Ladyland. It was a double album and the first one he fully produced by himself. It became his only album to reach number 1 on the Billboard charts. Songs like Voodoo Child, Slight Return, Crosstown Traffic, and his cover of Bob Dylan's All Along the Watchtower showed how far his music had come. His version of Watchtower became his only top 20 hit on the Billboard Hot 100. Even Dylan said Hendrix found things in the song no one else would have thought of. This album was also a sign of growing tension. Jimi had ended his working relationship with Chas Chandler, the man who first brought him to England. He wanted more control. He became so focused on the sound that he often played bass himself instead of Noel Redding. His perfectionism was taking over. In 1968, he and his manager Michael Jeffrey bought the old Generation Club in Greenwich Village. At first, they planned to reopen it as a music venue, but then they realized Jimi was spending nearly $300,000 a year on studio time, so they decided to build their own studio instead. They called it Electric Lady Studio. It was designed by architect John Storek to match Jimi's style. The rooms had no sharp corners. There were round windows, soft lights, and colorful murals. Everything was meant to feel creative and calm. But the project ran into trouble. Jimi was earning up to $100,000 per show at venues like Madison Square Garden, but even that wasn't enough. The studio took twice as long to finish and cost nearly $1 million by the end of 1970. On June 15, 1970, Jimi played there for the first time. He jammed with Steve Winwood and Chris Wood from Traffic. The next day, he recorded Nightbird Flying. On August 25th, the studio officially opened, but Jimi had already left for England. He never came back. He never saw the finished studio again. The end of the Jimi Hendrix experience came earlier that summer. On June 29, 1969, they played their last show at the Denver Pop Festival. The festival took place at Mile High Stadium over 3 days. Tickets were $6 per day, or $15 for the whole weekend. It featured acts like Joe Cocker and Creedence Clearwater Revival. That day, Jimi held a press conference where he introduced Billy Cox as his new bassist. Cox was his friend from the Army. Noel Redding and Mitch Mitchell hadn't been told. The band was falling apart. During their set, around 2,500 people who couldn't get into the stadium started fighting with police. Officers fired tear gas to control the crowd. The gas blew into the stadium. Jimi and the band had to run off stage. They escaped in a panel van, but it was quickly surrounded by panicked fans. The roof started to cave in. Mitch Mitchell later said they thought they were about to be crushed. The next day, Noel Redding flew back to England. That was the end of the original experience. Later that summer, Jimi played Woodstock. He was supposed to close the show on Sunday night, August 17, 1969. But the event ran behind schedule. Jimi didn't take the stage until 8 a.m. on Monday, August 18. Most of the crowd was gone. Of the 400,000 people who had come to Woodstock, only about 30,000 were still there. There was a fight backstage about whether Jimi should play the Star-Spangled Banner. Michael Jeffrey didn't want him to. He said the song had caused a riot in Dallas and feared it might cause trouble again. But after Jeffrey left, music promoter Jerry Morrison told Jimi to do it anyway. Jimi walked on stage and played the anthem in a way no one had heard before. His guitar made the sounds of bombs, sirens, and screams. It was loud and strange and unforgettable. Some people thought it was political. Jimi later said it wasn't. He said he was just playing what he felt. In 1966, everything started to change for Jimi Jimi Hendrix. That was the year he took LSD for the first time. From that moment on, his music began to sound like nothing anyone had heard before. According to his girlfriend Kathy Etchingham, Jimi started having visions and wanted to turn them into music. He tried to explain them to people, but most of the time it didn't make sense. These ideas didn't connect to the real world, but when he played guitar, those visions came alive. LSD opened a new door for him, and he kept walking through it. He didn't hold back. By 1967, he was dropping acid during performances. At the Monterey Pop Festival, he was high on LSD when he walked on stage. That night, he set his guitar on fire. It shocked the crowd and made headlines around the world. But it wasn't just for show. It was a moment that showed how far he was willing to go. He was chasing something bigger than music. By the late 1960s, LSD had become a regular part of his life. So had marijuana, hashish, amphetamines, and cocaine. These drugs were always with him on tour. They shaped his sound. Songs like Purple Haze came from that world. Tracks like 1983, A Merman I Should Turn to Be, told strange stories that felt like dreams. Biographer Charles Cross said that very few stars were as connected to the drug culture as Jimi was. His music became a mirror of the psychedelic world he lived in. But there was another side of him that few people saw. Hendrix had a serious problem with alcohol. When he drank, something changed. People close to him said he became angry. The peace and calm were gone. One of the worst moments happened in the late 1960s. During a drunken argument, he hit his girlfriend Carmen Barrero with a vodka bottle. The cut above her eye needed stitches. His drinking started early. In July 1962, after he left the army, he spent almost all of his $400 savings on a single night of drinking. He once said people told him he got foolish when he drank. But as he became more famous, the problem got worse. He was arrested several times during tours for getting into drunken fights. People close to him said alcohol brought out a different side. One person called it the biggest curse in his life. It caused mood swings and sometimes violent outbursts that didn't match the public image people saw on stage. Then came the Toronto arrest. On May 3rd, 1969, Hendrix landed at Toronto International Airport. Customs officers stopped him and found small amounts of heroin and hashish in his bag. They arrested him at 1:30 p.m. after tests confirmed the drugs were real. He was released later that day on $10,000 bail. That night, he played a concert at Maple Leaf Gardens. During Red House, he changed the lyrics and said, "Soon as I get out of jail, I want to see her." The charges were serious. On May 5th, he was officially charged with 2 counts of drug possession. Each charge carried up to 20 years in prison. His bandmates Noel Redding and Mitch Mitchell later said they had been warned the day before about a planned bust. They believed someone planted the drugs. For his trial in December 1969, Hendrix had to cut his hair and wear formal suits. The trial lasted 3 days. After 8 hours of jury discussion, he was found not guilty. Outside the courthouse, he smiled, held up a peace sign, and said, "Canada has given me the best Christmas present I ever had." But freedom didn't bring peace. On September 3rd, 1970, while touring in Europe, Hendrix arrived in Gothenburg, Sweden. That day, he was met by Eva Sundquist. She claimed that he had fathered her son, James. The child had been born on January 5th, 1970. She said they had been together during his Stockholm concert in January 1969. This was not the first time someone made a claim like this, but the timing made it worse. Hendrix was already tired, using drugs heavily and emotionally drained. That night's concert was a mess. He forgot lyrics. He wandered from song to song. People in the audience said he looked completely out of it. 2 weeks later came the end. On the night of September 17th, Hendrix was with his girlfriend, Monica Danneman. They drank wine at her apartment in the Samarkand Hotel in London. After going to a party, they came back around 3 a.m. Monica later said they talked until about 7 a.m. and then went to sleep. Sometime after that, Jimi took 9 Vesperax sleeping pills. That was 18 times the normal dose. The drug was so strong it later got banned in many countries. In the days leading up to his death, Hendrix had been sick. He was exhausted and likely had the flu. He was also losing trust in people around him. He felt trapped by the music industry and unsure about his future. He was only 27 years old. That put him in the tragic 27 Club, along with Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Brian Jones, and later Kurt Cobain and Amy Winehouse. On September 18, 1970, at 11:18 a.m., an ambulance was called to the hotel. It arrived 9 minutes later. The crew found the door open. The gas fire was still on. Hendrix was lying in bed. He was covered in vomit. His airways were completely blocked. Strangely, Monica was not there, even though she later said she never left his side. Ambulance worker Reggie Jones said it was one of the worst scenes he had ever seen. The vomit was dark, almost black, and soaked through the pillow. Hendrix was taken to St. Mary Abbott's Hospital. Doctors tried to revive him, but it was too late. He was pronounced dead at 12:45 p.m. There were still questions. Surgeon John Bannister said that red wine came pouring out of Hendrix's lungs and stomach. He believed Hendrix drowned, either at the hotel or on the way to the hospital. But toxicology reports showed very little alcohol in his system. In 1992, new questions led to a private investigation. Scotland Yard reopened the case and interviewed everyone involved. In 1993, they closed the case again. No clear answers were found. Jimi Hendrix is back in the spotlight in 2025. Even though he passed away more than 50 years ago, his legacy is as strong as ever. On March 18, 2025, the state of Washington honored him with the Medal of Merit. This is the highest award the state can give to a civilian. The ceremony was held at the Capitol building in Olympia. Governor Bob Ferguson gave the award along with Lieutenant Governor Denny Heck and Secretary of State Steve Hobbs. They handed it to Hendrix's family and to the Museum of Pop Culture, which features a full exhibit about his life and music. The medal was given to recognize Hendrix for his influence both in the state and across the world. Governor Ferguson called him one of the most influential guitarists of all time. He said Hendrix's impact went far beyond Washington and helped shape modern music. While this honor was taking place in Olympia, something else was happening on the road. The Experience Hendrix Tour made its return after a 5-year break caused by the pandemic. The tour travels across North America with a group of musicians who play Hendrix's songs and celebrate his work. Tonight, March 21st, the show takes place at the Chicago Theater. It is part of a 33-date tour that covers major cities across the United States. The tour lineup is filled with big names. Kenny Wayne Shepherd is performing along with Zakk Wylde, known from Pantera and Black Label Society. Eric Johnson is part of the group too. So are Marcus King, Devin Allman, Samantha Fish, and Christone Kingfish Ingram. Each artist brings their own sound, but they all join together to honor Hendrix's music. One special guest is set to appear at the final show. On April 12th, the tour will end at the Fox Theater in Atlanta. That night, blues legend Buddy Guy will return to the stage. He is 88 years old and announced his retirement from touring last year. This performance is a rare moment. It is even more meaningful because Buddy Guy is the only person in the lineup that Hendrix himself called an influence. Buddy Guy shared a message about the event. He said he still remembers meeting Hendrix at a club in New York in 1968. He said they became friends, and he is thankful for that memory. Now he returns to perform one last time in honor of Hendrix. John McDermott works as the catalog director for the company. He recently said that everything they do still comes back to the music. He explained that Hendrix is the reason the company exists. He said, at the end of the day, it's his great music that brings people together.